certified incident briefings, real video evidence, strict accountability. You are viewing bodycam incident reports.
Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Now!
Officer, this is my home. I am not resisting and you do not have legal grounds to detain me.
You match the description. Turn around before this gets worse.
It already has. Your body cam is on, your voice is escalating, and you are violating my Fourth Amendment rights.
Last warning.
Officer Kyle Brannigan was screaming, his voice cracking with an adrenaline-fueled mixture of fear and rage. His hand was hovering over his holster, the retention strap already unsnapped. He was 29 years old with 3 years on the force, and he was convinced he was in control. He was wrong. The man standing next to the pristine cherry-red 1967 Ford Mustang was not panicking. He wasn't begging. He wasn't running. He was Major Elias Thorne, United States Marine Corps, retired. At 58 years old, his posture was as rigid as a steel beam. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and work trousers, but he carried himself with the undeniable gravity of a man who had commanded battalions in Fallujah and Helmand Province. He looked at Officer Brannigan not with fear, but with a profound, disappointing pity. "Officer," Elias said, his voice a low, controlled baritone that cut through the younger man's shouting. "You are making a catastrophic error in judgment. Every word you are speaking is being recorded by the security camera on my garage and by your own body camera. I suggest you take a deep breath and lower your voice before you destroy your career. Don't you tell me what to do." Brannigan stepped forward, invading Elias's personal space. "You fit the description of a suspect seen casing houses in this neighborhood. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." Before we go any further into this absolutely infuriating encounter, I need you to do something for me. Go down to the comments section right now and tell me where you are watching from. Are you in the US, Canada, the UK? And if you believe that a man's home is his castle, and that badge or no badge respect goes both ways, hit that subscribe button. You need to see how this ends, because what happens to Officer Brannigan is something you're going to want to witness. The sun was beating down on the concrete of the driveway in the quiet, affluent suburb of Oak Creek. It was a neighborhood of manicured lawns and American flags hanging from front porches. It was the kind of place people moved to after 40 years of hard work to find peace. Elias Thorne had bought this house 2 years ago using the savings from 30 years of military service and his subsequent work as a private defense consultant for the Pentagon. Brannigan didn't see a homeowner. He didn't see a veteran. He saw a black man in a high-end neighborhood standing next to a classic car that was worth more than the officer's annual salary. And in Brannigan's mind, that equation didn't add up to ownership. It added up to suspicion. "I am not a suspect," Elias said, not moving an inch. "And you do not have reasonable suspicion to detain me. I am washing my car. Unless you can articulate a specific crime I am committing, you are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "I'm investigating a burglary report," Brannigan lied. The call had actually been a suspicious person check, a non-emergency call from a neighbor 3 streets over who reported a stranger walking looking at houses. Elias was nowhere near that street, and he wasn't walking. He was waxing a car. "A burglary?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "Then you should be looking for a burglar, not harassing a taxpayer on his own property. I am asking you to leave. And I'm telling you, you're under arrest for obstruction." Brannigan lunged. Elias didn't flinch. He didn't fight back. He knew that any movement, any defensive posture could give this panicked officer a reason to use lethal force. Elias had survived combat zones where the enemy was hidden in the hills. He wasn't going to die in his own driveway because a rookie cop couldn't handle his ego. "You are making a mistake, son," Elias said softly as Brannigan grabbed his wrist. "A mistake that is going to cost you everything. To understand the gravity of this moment, you have to understand the man who is currently having his arm twisted behind his back." Elias Thorne wasn't just a retired Marine. He was a legend in his unit. He was a Mustang in the military sense, an enlisted man who had earned his commission through sheer competence and grit, rising to the rank of major. He had been responsible for the logistics and safety of thousands of troops. He held a top-secret security clearance that was higher than the chief of police's. That Saturday had started perfectly. It was 10 a.m. on a beautiful October morning. Elias had his routine. Coffee on the back patio, a read through the Wall Street Journal, and then car maintenance. The 1967 Mustang was his pride and joy, a restoration project that had taken him 5 years to complete. He was applying a coat of high-grade Carnauba wax, a meditative process that he loved. He was listening to jazz on a small portable radio. He was in his element. He was safe, or so he thought. Officer Kyle Brannigan was on a different trajectory. He had transferred to the Oak Creek Division 6 months prior, looking for a quieter beat after finding the city precinct too intense. But Brannigan brought his intensity with him. He was known among his peers as a hunter, an officer who was constantly looking for the big bust, the one that would get his name in the papers. He patrolled with an aggressive edge, scanning for anything that looked out of place. When the dispatch call came in, suspicious person, male, dark complexion, dark clothing, looking into windows on Elm Street. Brannigan was 4 blocks away on Maple Drive. He turned his cruiser around. He didn't go to Elm Street. He cruised the perimeter. He saw Elias in the driveway on Maple Drive. Elias was wearing a dark gray t-shirt. To Brannigan, that was a match. Never mind that Elias wasn't looking in windows. He was buffing a fender. Never mind that he wasn't on Elm Street. Brannigan saw a black man in a neighborhood that was predominantly white, and his bias filled in the rest of the blanks. He pulled his cruiser to a screeching halt, blocking the bottom of the driveway. He didn't wave. He didn't say hello. He stepped out with his hand already on his belt. "Hey, you step away from the car." Elias had paused the microfiber cloth in his hand. He looked at the officer, confused at first. "Can I help you, officer?" "I said, step away from the car. Whose vehicle is this?" "It's mine," Elias said calmly, placing the cloth on the hood. "Is there a problem?" "We've had reports of people casing homes. I need to see some ID." This was the pivot point. This was the moment where a good officer would have looked at the bucket of soapy water, the open garage door revealing a well-organized tool bench, and the demeanor of the man, and realized, this is the homeowner. A good officer would have apologized for the disturbance and driven away. But Brannigan wasn't a good officer. He was a bully with a badge. When Elias didn't immediately scramble to obey, Brannigan felt his authority was being challenged, and for a man like Brannigan, that was unforgivable. "I don't need to show you ID to wash my own car," Elias had said, turning back to the fender. "If you don't have a warrant, and you haven't seen me commit a crime, this conversation is over." That was when Brannigan lost it. He stormed up the driveway, crossing the property line, escalating a casual encounter into a constitutional crisis. Now, with his face pressed against the warm metal of his own car, Elias felt the cold steel of the handcuffs bite into his wrists. He closed his eyes for a second, not in defeat, but to center himself. He needed to be the calmest person in the equation. "I am complying," Elias stated loudly for the benefit of the recording. "I am not resisting. Officer, I am informing you that I have a fused vertebrae in my neck from a service injury. If you force my head down, you will cause permanent damage. Do you understand?" "Stop talking," Brannigan snapped, cinching the cuffs tighter than necessary. "You want to play lawyer? We can play lawyer at the station." Across the street, Mrs. Higgins, a 65-year-old retired schoolteacher who had known Elias for 2 years, was standing on her porch. She was holding her phone up. "Officer," she shouted. "That is Major Thorne. He lives there." "What are you doing?" Brannigan ignored her. He spun Elias around. "Walk to the car, now. You are ignoring exculpatory evidence. Elias said as he was marched down his own driveway. "My neighbor is vouching for me. My house keys are in my pocket. My registration is in the glove box. You are willfully choosing to arrest a man for a crime that does not exist because your ego cannot handle being wrong. I'm arresting you for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct." Brannigan sneered, opening the back door of the cruiser. "You refused a lawful order to identify yourself during an investigation." "There is no investigation," Elias corrected him, ducking his head to enter the cramped back seat. "There is only harassment. Delaware versus Prowse. Terry versus Ohio. You need articulable, reasonable suspicion. Walking while black is not a crime, and neither is washing a car." Brannigan slammed the door. The sound echoed through the quiet street like a gunshot. Inside the car, the air was stale and smelled of plastic and sanitizer. Elias shifted his shoulders, trying to alleviate the pressure on his wrists. The handcuffs were tight, punishingly tight. He could feel his fingers starting to tingle. He took a deep breath. He had been in tighter spots. He had been pinned down by sniper fire in the desert. He had negotiated with warlords. He could handle a 20-minute ride with an incompetent civil servant. Brannigan got into the driver's seat. He was breathing heavy, his chest heaving. He looked in the rearview mirror, expecting to see fear. He wanted to see the man in the back seat broken. Instead, he saw Elias staring right back at him, eyes cold and calculating. "You have my wallet in my back pocket," Elias said. "You didn't check it. That's a procedural error. You didn't pat me down for weapons until the cuffs were on. Another error. You turned your back on a suspect to open the car door. Tactical error. You are sloppy Officer Brannigan." "How do you know my name?" Brannigan snapped, starting the engine. "It's on your nameplate, and it will be on the lawsuit," Elias replied. "I'm memorizing it, just like I'm memorizing the time 10:42 a.m., and the fact that you haven't read me my Miranda rights yet." "I don't have to read them until I question you," Brannigan retorted, pulling away from the curb aggressively. "True," Elias acknowledged. "But you're still talking to me. You're trying to justify this to yourself. You know deep down you messed up. You heard the neighbor. You see the house. You see the car. You know I live there. But you can't back down now, can you? You're committed to the lie." Brannigan didn't answer. He turned up the radio to drown out the voice of reason from the back seat. He drove faster than necessary, weaving through the suburban traffic. Back on Maple Drive, Mrs. Higgins was still recording. She didn't stop until the cruiser was out of sight. Then she hit stop and immediately dialed a number. She didn't call the police station. She called the local news station's tip line. Then she walked over to Elias's driveway, picked up the microfiber cloth he had dropped, and folded it neatly on his tool bench. She looked at the security camera mounted above the garage door, its red light blinking steadily. "I hope you got all that," she whispered to the camera. In the patrol car, Brannigan was sweating. The adrenaline was wearing off and the reality was setting in. The guy was calm. Too calm. And he knew the law. Major Thorne, the neighbor, had called him. Brannigan gripped the steering wheel tighter. It didn't matter. The guy had refused an order. That was enough. It had to be enough. "You're going to be processed, fingerprinted, and put in a cell," Brannigan said, trying to regain dominance. "You'll be there all weekend until the judge sees you Monday morning." "We'll see," Elias said. "But I have a feeling your watch commander is going to have a very different opinion on the matter." "My watch commander backs his officers," Brannigan said confidently. Elias just smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Officer, I was training men when you were still in diapers. I know a leader, and I know a liability. You are a liability. And when we get to that station, your superiors are going to figure that out in about 5 minutes." The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Brannigan parked in the Sallyport, the secure garage where arrestees were unloaded. He pulled Elias out of the car, roughly grabbing his upper arm. "Watch the neck," Elias warned sharply. "I am walking. You do not need to drag me." They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It was a stark room with fluorescent lights, concrete floors, and a high counter where the booking sergeant sat. Sergeant Tom Miller was a fixture at the department. He was 55, a man who had seen every kind of criminal and every kind of cop pass through his doors. He was drinking coffee and reading a report when Brannigan walked in with Elias. Miller looked up. He took in the scene instantly. He saw Brannigan flushed and agitated. He saw the prisoner, an older black man, well-groomed, standing tall despite the handcuffs, dressed in expensive work clothes. "What do we have here, Brannigan?" Miller asked, his voice gravelly. "Obstruction, disorderly conduct, resisting," Brannigan recited, rattling off the charges. "Suspect refused to ID during a burglary investigation. Caused a scene." Miller looked at Elias. Elias looked at Miller. There was a moment of recognition, not that they knew each other personally, but they recognized the bearing of a fellow serviceman. "Sir," Miller said to Elias, "did you resist?" "I maintained my position on my own property, Sergeant," Elias said clearly. "I refused an unlawful search and seizure. I am Major Elias Thorne, USMC, retired. My identification is in my back right pocket. I would appreciate it if you would retrieve it so we can end this charade." Miller's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Brannigan. "You arrested him at his house? He wouldn't prove he lived there." Brannigan defended himself. "He was being uncooperative." Miller sighed. He walked around the counter. "Turn around, Major," he said respectfully. Miller put on a pair of latex gloves and reached into Elias's back pocket. He pulled out a slim leather wallet. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the driver's license. Elias James Thorne. 142 Maple Drive. The address matched the location of the arrest. The second thing he saw was the military ID major. United States Marine Corps. Retired. The third thing he saw, tucked behind the military ID, was a white access card with a gold chip and a Pentagon seal. It was a Department of Defense contractor badge with high-level clearance markings. Miller stared at the cards. Then he looked at Brannigan. The look was not friendly. "Brannigan?" Miller said, his voice dangerously low. "Did you run the plates on the vehicle in the driveway?" I didn't have time. He was escalating." "You didn't have time," Miller repeated. "But you had time to arrest a homeowner for standing in his own driveway. He fit the description." "What description? Black male." Miller scoffed. He looked back at Elias. "Major, I am going to uncuff you right now." "No, Sergeant," Elias said firmly. "You are not." The room went silent. Brannigan looked confused. Miller looked concerned. "Sir," Miller asked. "I am currently under arrest," Elias stated. "Officer Brannigan has deprived me of my liberty. If you uncuff me now, you are tampering with the evidence of a crime in progress, the crime being committed against me. I want the watch commander down here. I want a photographer to document the marks on my wrists. And I want my attorney called. Until then, these cuffs stay on." Elias knew exactly what he was doing. If he let them release him now, they would try to sweep it under the rug. They would say it was a misunderstanding and send him home. He wasn't going to let them off the hook. He was going to make them choke on it. "Major," Miller said, "I'm trying to help you here." "Then call your lieutenant," Elias said, "and tell him his officer just arrested a man who advises the Joint Chiefs of Staff on urban warfare protocols." Brannigan's face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast he looked like he might faint. "Joint Chiefs?" he whispered. "You really stepped in it, kid," Miller muttered, reaching for the phone. "Lieutenant, yeah, you need to come down to booking. Now. No, it can't wait. We have a situation." Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins arrived 3 minutes later. She was a no-nonsense woman who had been trying to clean up the department's image for years. When she walked into the booking area and saw a handcuffed black man standing like a statue while her officers looked like terrified schoolchildren, she knew it was bad. Talk to me, she commanded. Sergeant Miller handed her the wallet. She looked at the IDs. She looked at the address. She looked at Brannigan. Officer Brannigan, she said, her voice ice cold. Why is this man in handcuffs? He refused to identify himself, ma'am. He was belligerent. Belligerent, Jenkins repeated. She turned to Elias. Sir, I am Lieutenant Jenkins. I apologize for the inconvenience. We can remove the cuffs and discuss this in my office. Lieutenant, Elias said, I want to file a formal complaint. I want the body camera footage secured immediately before it can be accidentally corrupted. And I want a medical evaluation. My hands are numb. Of course, Jenkins said. Miller, get the keys. Uncuff him. Get the medic down here. Miller stepped forward and unlocked the cuffs. Elias brought his hands forward. His wrists were deeply indented, the skin broken in one place where the metal had dug in. He rubbed them, slowly grimacing. Officer Brannigan, Jenkins said, not looking away from Elias's injuries. Badge and gun, now. Ma'am, Brannigan stammered. But surely this is just a training issue. You arrested a man on his own property without probable cause, Jenkins snapped. You escalated a consensual encounter into a constitutional violation. You ignored exculpatory evidence, and you injured a citizen. Put your badge and gun on the counter. You are on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Get out of my station. Brannigan's hands shook as he unbuckled his gun belt. The heavy thud of the weapon hitting the counter was the only sound in the room. He placed his badge next to it. He looked at Elias, hoping for some mercy, some sign of forgiveness. Elias looked through him. You should have listened, son. I told you. You cannot police a community you do not respect. Brannigan walked out the door, stripped of his authority, a civilian again. Major, Jenkins said softly, please, come to my office. We want to make this right. Lieutenant, Elias said, making it right would have been training that officer not to profile me in the first place. Right now, we are past making it right. Now we are talking about accountability. Elias spent the next 2 hours in the station not as a prisoner, but as a prosecutor of sorts. He gave a detailed statement. He waited for his lawyer, a sharp civil rights attorney named Marcus Sterling, to arrive. When Sterling got there, the mood shifted from apology to litigation. We are preserving all claims, Sterling told the lieutenant. We want the dash cam, the body cam, the dispatch logs, and Officer Brannigan's disciplinary file, today. We will cooperate fully, Jenkins promised. She looked defeated. She knew the city was about to write a very large check. Elias walked out of the station at 2 p.m. The sun was still shining. He got into an Uber his lawyer had called. He didn't look back at the precinct. He just wanted to go home and finish waxing his car. But he knew as he watched the city pass by the window that his quiet life was over. He had a new mission now. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. Mrs. Higgins's video had been uploaded to social media by her grandson. It was titled, Cop Arrests Innocent Marine Veteran in Driveway. The video was damning. It showed the peaceful scene. It showed Brannigan's aggression. It showed Elias's calm. It showed the neighbors shouting. And it showed the arrest. The views ticked up 10,000, 50,000, 1 million. Comments poured in from all over the world. This makes my blood boil. The man served his country and can't even wash his car. Fire that cop. Arrest him for assault. Look at the discipline of the major. He could have taken that kid down, but he beat him with his mind. The media camped out on Elias's lawn. He didn't come out. He stayed inside drinking tea, talking to his lawyer. He wasn't interested in being a celebrity. He was interested in justice. The lawsuit was filed on Wednesday. Thorne versus City of Oak Creek et al. It alleged unlawful seizure, excessive force, false imprisonment, and violation of civil rights. It asked for damages, but more importantly, it asked for a federal consent decree to force the department to change its hiring and training practices. The city attorney took one look at the footage and the lawsuit and called the mayor. We have to settle. the attorney said. "We cannot go to trial. A jury will destroy us. The plaintiff is a war hero. The defendant is indefensible." The mayor agreed. "How much?" "It's going to be 7 figures." While the lawyers negotiated, the internal affairs investigation into Brannigan concluded rapidly. They found that in his 3 years, Brannigan had stopped black motorists at 4 times the rate of white motorists. He had a history of attitude complaints that had been ignored by previous supervisors. The suspicious person call was analyzed. The caller admitted she hadn't seen a crime, just someone she didn't recognize. It was classic bias, and Brannigan had weaponized it. Elias sat in his living room watching the news report. The anchor was talking about him. Major Thorne serves as a reminder that dignity is not granted by authority. It is inherent in the individual. And when authority fails to recognize that dignity, it loses its legitimacy. Elias turned off the TV. He looked at his hands. The bruising on his wrists was turning yellow and purple. It would heal, but the memory of being treated like a criminal in front of his neighbors would not fade so easily. 6 months later, the settlement was finalized. The city of Oak Creek agreed to pay Major Elias Thorne $1.8 million. It was one of the largest settlements for a single arrest in the state's history. But the money wasn't the headline. The headline was the reforms. As part of the agreement, the police department had to implement mandatory de-escalation training. They had to overhaul their suspicious person protocols. Officers were no longer allowed to detain individuals solely based on vague reports without independent corroboration of criminal activity. And they had to establish a civilian oversight board. Officer Kyle Brannigan was fired. He was also decertified by the state police board, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. He tried to fight it, claiming he was a scapegoat, but the union wouldn't back him. The video was too clear. He was toxic. Elias stood on the steps of City Hall for the press conference. He wore a suit, his Marine Corps lapel pin shining in the sun. He looked out at the sea of reporters. "I did not ask for this fight," Elias said into the microphone. "I just wanted to wash my car, but when the fight came to me, I had a duty to engage. Not for myself, but for every young man and woman who doesn't have the rank of major or the resources to hire a top-tier attorney." He held up a check. "This money is not a lottery win. It is blood money. It is the price of my liberty that was stolen for 2 hours, and I will not keep a cent of it." The crowd went silent. "I am establishing the Thorne Legal Defense Fund," Elias announced. "Every dollar of this settlement will go towards providing legal representation for veterans and citizens who have been victims of police misconduct. We will fight for them just as I fought for myself." The applause started slowly, then grew to a roar. Back at home, the red Mustang sat in the garage gleaming. It was finally finished. Elias walked into the garage that evening. He ran his hand over the fender. It was smooth as glass. He thought about Brannigan. He didn't hate the man. He felt sorry for him. Brannigan had been given power without wisdom, and it had destroyed him. The aftermath of the case rippled through the community for years. The Thorne Rule became a standard part of the local police academy curriculum. Trainees were shown the video of the encounter. They were taught to analyze Brannigan's mistakes, the aggression, the assumption, the failure to listen. Elias continued to live on Maple Drive. The neighbors treated him with a new level of reverence. Mrs. Higgins brought him an apple pie every Christmas. They never spoke much about that day, but the bond was there. She had stood up for him when it mattered. One afternoon, a year after the incident, Elias was out in the driveway again. He was checking the oil in the Mustang. A police cruiser drove by slowly. It wasn't an aggressive patrol. It was a community policing beat. The officer behind the wheel was young, black, and female. She slowed down as she passed the house. She didn't stop to interrogate him. She didn't glare. She rolled down the window and nodded. "Afternoon, Major," she called out respectfully. Car looks great. Elias stood up, wiped his hands on a rag and smiled. A real genuine smile. Good afternoon, officer. Stay safe out there. She waved and drove on. It was a small moment, but it was everything. It was what policing was supposed to be: respect, community, peace. Elias closed the hood of the Mustang. The click of the latch was satisfying. He looked at the sky. It was a good day. He was free. He was safe. And he had made sure that the next person standing in a driveway might be a little safer too. We live in a world where assumptions can be dangerous, where a split-second judgment based on bias can ruin lives. Elias Thorne had the strength, the rank, and the knowledge to survive his encounter. But what about those who don't? What about the people who panic, who run, who don't have a camera recording them? That is why this story matters. It reminds us that accountability is the only check against tyranny. It reminds us that freedom is fragile and must be defended sometimes on a battlefield and sometimes in a driveway on a Saturday morning. Thank you for reading this story. It's a heavy one, I know, but it's a necessary one. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the nature of justice and the power of standing your ground, please drop a comment below. Tell me, do you think the settlement was enough, or should Officer Brannigan have faced criminal charges? And please share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth about our world. Until next time, stay safe, know your rights, and look out for your neighbors.
Investigation officially closed. For additional unedited footage, remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for trusting Bodycam Incident Reports.